Hi, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the session where we're going to be talking about AI and how investments in AI has basically changed the way we are doing our business strategies, enhancing user experience, as well as optimizing operational efficiencies. Today, we have a great group of panelists here across the ecosystem, and we'll start off with our introductions. So perhaps, Sachin, you can start first.
Sure. My name is Sachin Dugal. I'm the chief wizard at Builder.ai and the founder. We started the company with a really simple mission. 90% of the world are not technical, but now need to be digitally native or AI native and no idea how to get there. And so we've built a platform, think about it as Lego meets AI to build software applications.
Hi, I'm Sandeep Bakshi. I'm the head of European investments at Prosus Ventures. Prosus is the largest listed tech company in Europe. We're a $100 billion plus market cap company. We're global investors and very excited to be here.
Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be back in the Abu Dhabi Finance Week. Gets better every year. Faisal Al-Breiki, Senior Director at eAnd, with a new team at the group level called the AI and Data Office that was formed under the newly appointed Group Chief AI and Data Officer. Etisalat, as you all know, the telco here in the UAE, but grows to becoming a technology company across 38 countries today.
Thank you. So our first question will be for everyone here. As the world becomes increasingly tech-driven, how do each of you approach the intersection of technology innovation and business growth? So Sachin, perhaps.
So look, I think it's the thesis for how we started or why we started the company. Just to sort of set you a context, we shipped about 100,000 software features last year. That makes us one of the largest producers of software on the planet. But when we think about our use cases, we're helping everyone from the bakery down the road to Qatar Life Insurance and every stream in the middle. And what we're seeing is a unanimous sort of view from the non-technical audiences, which make up 90% of the world. And they're saying, we don't want to be irrelevant in a world that is digitally native or AI native, but we have a fear of failure. And so we know we need to create software, but we don't know how. We know we need to be able to use AI, but we don't know how. And so Builder's real mission is to empower people to be able to unleash their potential by building and creating software to be relevant. And that could be everything from how they service their own customers. It could be how they remove human variability. It could be how they can go to new markets. And we're really seeing that entire spectrum.
Yeah, that's kind of like democratizing the access to technologies for even the smallest mom and pop shops. That's great. And how about Sandeep? Where do you see in terms of the approach of intersection of technology, innovation, and business growth?
Yeah, I think for us, at least as it pertains to the topic of this panel, the way we're seeing AI improve customer support, customer experience is probably across a couple of different vectors. There's personalization, optimization, and then there's search. And if we think about, let's start with optimization first. So we're one of the largest investors in food delivery businesses globally. Actually, one of our food delivery businesses is going public in Dubai, I think today. And when it comes to optimization, ensuring that you're leveraging all of the best technology to make sure that riders are spending the most efficient amount of time delivering orders. As it pertains to personalization, I would venture to guess that most people in this room have shopped online at some point, and I'm sure that you get bombarded with ads of things that you're more likely to go out and buy, especially going into the next 2 weeks of this season. And then the last one, and touching on what you talked about, democratizing access, which I think is very, very important and something that's very key to us, goes to search. Historically speaking, search was text-driven, and text is something, especially as we're global investors, may not be something that's accessible to everybody in the world. You can now take pictures and you can do search. You can now dictate something and you can search. And that is something that's really driving innovation, and we're looking for opportunities that really are powered by one of those three vectors.
Thank you. And Faisal, from eAnd's perspective?
Yeah, so if you go back in time and you think about the telco industry, which is where we started decades ago, it powers sort of socioeconomic opportunity, economic growth across industries and across nations. So fast forward to today, we're going through a massive transformation within eAnd. Speaking of food delivery, investments in companies like the Careem super app, and we think about how data and AI and sort of disruptive technology is going to affect this portfolio that we've built over time. And we go back to our cultural beginnings about operational excellence with a telco backbone that we've built here in the UAE, but now that you can see across our global footprint across 38 countries and different opcos that we work with on the telco side. But we also look at companies like StarsPlay in the media side and Careem and the super app and delivery, with the cross-pollination of technologies like AI, making the consumer experience a little bit better, adding productivity internally, thinking about how we can implement AI to the best of our abilities across this portfolio in 38 countries, while applying best practices, but also thinking about data privacy and protecting the consumers that we've served for decades. We have sort of brand to uphold and a reputation. We're a publicly listed company here in the ADX. So there's a lot at stake, but we're excited for the future.
I think, one of the things that you mentioned in your question, which I think is really important, which is this transformation of everyone. If we go back to November 22, it wasn't like language models just got invented, because BERT had been around for 8 years. Computational conversation has been here since the 1930s. So what was the real invention? The real invention was actually a design change. For the first time ever, a really complex piece of software could be navigating with a WhatsApp experience. And we underestimate the power of simplicity. And what we're seeing, not only in our own customers globally, is companies are now rushing, entrepreneurs are rushing, small businesses are rushing to say, how can we make our experience to the company, to our customers simpler? And I think that's the big transformation wave.
It's more like the user experience optimization, making it easier and accessible, right? That's a really great point. Thank you. And another question for you, because you have, as Builder.ai, you have experience working with big companies, like you mentioned, small SMEs and even small MSMEs. What do you think is the difference when it comes down to the application or implementation of AI? And what are the common mistakes you see in this process?
So one thing maybe just sort of useful is setting the stage for where we are. We're at the period of time which is very similar to when AOL launched the disk for the internet. And everyone said, oh my God, the internet is here. But actually the internet had been here 30 years before. And so in November 22, everyone said, AI is here, but actually this is the second wave. And so I think it's very important to understand that even though it's a second wave, it's really early. It's like a baby, for all intents and purposes, with the memory of the world, but the rational thinking of a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old if you're lucky on a good day. So I think that's one. And so why is that important? I think the next fact I'll tell you will be shocking, which is 93% of all POCs using AI and generative AI have failed. And they've not really gone past the POC stage. So other than getting it to help you answer questions like my interview questions, which I would normally run through ChatGPT to get some answers for, it doesn't go a lot further without a lot of expertise around it. And what you're seeing, though, on the customer side or the business side from all sides, is they're saying, we know this is going to be game-changing. And so what you've now got is this really interesting conundrum where the perception is that technology is so far ahead, the people are dying for the use case, but actually you're still not quite there in delivery. And that goes to my third point, which is why. It's not a lack of technology. Actually, it's a lack of investment up till now. So for example, if you want to do anything meaningful, let's look at like a call center experience. You want every call center call to be really good, right? You run a call center. I'm sure you want the NPS for every customer to be 30 and above. The issue you have is when we speak to customers, like, we have 1 billion minutes of conversation. I say, well, no, you don't. You have about 200,000 minutes of conversation multiplied by 1,000 different variants. But where are your 2,000 minutes? Do you know where they are? No. So no one's done the hard work to realize what is really the unique data versus what is the variable on top. And so where this leads to is an underinvestment in core infrastructure, core software, core data, to then be able to really run AI on top.
Yeah, and that becomes the importance of investment as well as capital, which comes down to my question for Sandeep. In your opinion, what do you believe are the top factors to consider when assessing startups for investment? Because it's very important, and particularly in the current economic climate.
So it's actually interesting because I could not agree more with what Sachin had said, where what I look for when assessing companies for investment, and I've got a portfolio company sitting here in the audience, it's quite simple. Are you delighting your customer every day? That's it. And that will manifest itself in a variety of metrics, but it comes down to that one core thing. And people will talk about, hey, we're going to further the anecdote that Sachin started, we're going to completely automate the call center experience. But if at the end of the day, the end user that's calling into that call center is not leaving with a positive experience, which was the objective in the first place, you failed your mission, right? And so we have companies, so I sit on the board of a healthcare company that's doing medical transcription for doctors. So one of the biggest issues in the US, Europe, is the fact that there is an administrative burden that's put on most doctors, healthcare practitioners to provide notes for insurance companies, billing, and it just, historically speaking, completely mismanaged. And what they do is relatively simple. They'll transcribe notes from medical calls and from medical interactions, and they'll make sure that all the insurance and billing is done correctly. It's simple. They're not trying to replace the doctor. They're not trying to do anything too far-flung from that. And what that manifests itself in is an extremely positive experience for doctors and healthcare practitioners. And that's kind of what we look toward. Well, of course, we can talk about valuation, which I'm sure there's a number of people have questions around. The reality is that for a lot of the use cases that we're seeing, the market size is very, very big. Another example for something that is really delighting customer experiences where we've spent time, we haven't made an investment yet, is coding copilots. Coding copilots is another, it's a relatively simple use case, but how do you ensure that you're delighting your customer? There's a statistic that for one of the larger players, 93% of all recommendations that are made by the coding copilot are accepted by the end software engineer. If somebody's improving my life 93% of my time and able to kind of complete my sentences, that's a delightful customer experience. So from my perspective, that's the main thing that we look for.
And I love the fact that you're emphasizing it's augmenting and not replacing humans, and that's really critical to the kind of the misconceptions around AI as well. So my next question is for Faisal. So, can you share more about how EN's transformation from a telecommunication company into a global technology company and investment group, the whole transition and the angle there?
Yeah, so maybe if we, it was our National Day a couple of days ago here, as some of you may know, on December 2nd. If we take a trip down memory lane, Talat formed in 1976. Fast forward to today, or maybe a couple of years back in 2022, where a very deliberate decision was made, in transforming the company. What does that mean? We're looking at participating in economic growth, here in the MENA region, and looking at the technology drivers that are going to sort of disrupt industries while participating in socio-economic growth here in the UAE, but also in the 38 countries where we now where we've now expanded into. And maybe going to Sachin's point on POCs, if we think about horizons of innovation, which use cases are going to be the most important over the next couple of years, and what comes into play commercially over the next 5 to 10, and what should we sort of keep in mind for the next 20 or beyond. And as we think about those horizons of innovation and the portfolio that we've built so far, we're a massive company with millions of customers. As some of my panelists here mentioned, we think about NPS quite a bit. We think about improving the customer experience all day, and we think about it in all the countries that we participate in, while also thinking of data privacy. So how do we leverage the best technology that's available to us in the group with external partnerships or developed organically within? To serve this customer base and to continue with this, the operational excellence culture that Etisalat was founded in 1976. And Ian will move on with going forward. And if we think about the structure of our group today, we have the B2C part, the B2C technology part under Ian Life, where you find investments like Kareem and Starzplay on the media side. You'll see that we have Ian Enterprise now, which looks at the B2B client side of the business and applying technology to enterprises, everything that's happening, of course, in our core asset here in the UAE, and then a small $200 million venture fund that we also launched in 2022, which, going back to the horizons of innovation, kind of gives us visibility into what's upcoming in the future. So we're able to partner with large companies, the AWSs of the world. We had $1 billion partnership recently to serve the region and train up and reskill and upskill talent in the region, all the way down to a Series A investment to the Ant Capital.
So you've built a very strong ecosystem that leverages on that to build technologies for different use cases there. So Sachin, I mean, you've had a lot of experience building AI-driven software development. What advice would you give, let's say, to business leaders when it comes down to the application of AI? Because you mentioned about POCs and the difficulties of going beyond that. Given this, what's your perspective there?
So I think maybe 3 different angles to this, right? So I think angle 1, everything is not a generative problem. We have so quickly as a population rushed to generate everything. And so I have a sort of a pet peeve around this for a specific purpose, which is, if you imagine any piece of work, writing code, building an application, call center phone calls, writing a document, if you broke that piece of work into atomic units, whatever it is, like at Builder, we think about the world as Lego-like reusable features. In fact, if you imagine all the sets of Lego in the world, there's only 2,647 unique pieces of Lego. And that make up the millions and millions and millions of Lego pieces circulated. And so what does that tell you? It tells you that actually when you find the unique element, it's reusable. It's not being generated. Reuse is really powerful, and it's underinvested in, because reuse doesn't have any error rate. What people call hallucinations or a confabulation, you can't hallucinate reusability because you've already shown it works. So I think number 1 is reuse. The second is you use AI to adjust what is being reused so that it fits the purpose of that particular instance, whether it's a conversation. Like I said, for 1 billion minutes of conversation, it's no more than 200,000 unique minutes. But you might use those minutes in a different order, in a different sequence to answer questions. So I think it's a balance between reuse and then stitching it together with AI or generating on top. That leads to the second point, which is you don't want to generate big things. The bigger you generate, whether a human or a machine does the generation, you induce error. Because if you imagine there's a percentage error rate, the bigger the thing, the absolute number will keep increasing. And I think that's really important when you think about strategy, because you'd mentioned something about jobs. So I've yet to see an AI take over an entire human's job. What I have seen is it's making humans into superhumans, or giving them superpowers, putting a cape, making them into a Superman or a Superwoman. And the reason is it takes away the tasks that otherwise I may not be good at doing, I may not enjoy doing. And here's news for everyone: I hate doing 5 times a day. And so a machine doesn't get bored, nor tired, nor hungry, doesn't need to go to the toilet. And so it's very good at these repetitive things, and it lets you free up time so that you can be more creative and more upstream in what you do. And so as business leaders, as you think about implementation of AI, you want to figure out, how can I give my workforce or my customers superpowers? Where can I reuse versus generate? And then I think the third thing, which is really important, and I know we've talked a lot about it in the last 2 years, is be responsible. The current age of technology we're in is highly irresponsible. And what do I mean by that? Well, because it doesn't know what it's saying. A lot of people use the word thinking, but an AI can't think. It's just a glorified parrot that repeats things if prompted in the right way. And here's the test. Go ask your favorite LLM the same question every single morning for the next 5 days. You will get a different answer every single day, even though the answer is the same. And I think that's a really important point for people to walk away with, to realize where we are.
Yeah, I like how you mentioned the angle should be strengthening your workforce and not replacing it. I think that's very critical from a leader's perspective. Sandeep, you invest in a lot of different portfolios across the world. So how do you navigate cross-border investments and the cultural nuances involved in scaling businesses in different regions?
I think it depends to some extent on what the business is trying to build and for what specific geography or what specific ecosystem. Some of the businesses that we have invested in are focused on really solving a problem for that specific market. So one of our portfolio companies is actually a Hub 71 portfolio. It's a company called Thunder. They're basically trying to democratize access to stock investing in the region. And having lived in America and the UK, investing in the stock market is probably one of the areas where I personally have seen the ability to create wealth for myself. And when we think about cross-border, what we're looking for is what are some opportunities that exist in other parts of the world that, from an inclusion perspective, perhaps don't exist in other parts of the world. And so that's one area that we're looking at that is specifically interesting. The other area that we're spending a lot of time in is where is there geographic arbitrage? So one portfolio company of ours is a company called Superside, which basically provides design and marketing services to people in the western parts of the world while leveraging expertise for design and creative. One, with a combination of a lot of the generative AI tools that are out there that are well documented, coupled with talent that is in less expensive geographies. So I think that as the world, as kind of technology proliferates and the world becomes more borderless, irrespective of kind of what you may have read in the news today or over the course of the past couple of weeks, there continues to be a tremendous amount of opportunity, and it's something that we look to capitalize on. And
Faisal, you mentioned before around how eAnd actually has a very diverse kind of stakeholders and investments and so forth. And what role do you see in emerging technologies like 5G, IoT, and AI playing in your strategic direction future, particularly in the MENA region?
Maybe if I go to Sandeep's point here before I jump directly into that question, but if we think about equity and inclusion, and I think the footprint that we have across what many of you would know is many different parts of sort of the emerging markets where we play. I think as this technology evolves, and perhaps if Sandeep is right, and we do kind of deglobalize, it's sort of incumbent upon sort of business leaders internationally to really think about how to maintain inclusion and access to those technologies. So, someone sitting in a Central African country has the same opportunities as someone sitting in the Bay Area, where my fellow panelists have either grown up or spent a lot of time. So, equity and inclusion, I think, is when it comes to technology, as this evolves over time, and whether we deglobalize or not, I think is critical. Going to your question, so 5G, of course, we've evolved from 3G to 4G to 5G. We continue to try to be at the bleeding edge, providing that backbone of connectivity in all the markets that we operate. There's not to get too technical, but there's lots of applications for AI within 5G, thinking of things like network slicing or traffic management. But then you can also think about the other way around, where 5G enables a data center through fiber. So we continue to sort of think about how the two affect each other. And as with the footprint that we have, I think it's also a huge opportunity when we think about things like edge computing and serving the enterprise through some of our portfolio companies. And whether it's the biggest private 5G installation for the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company or otherwise, we try to continue to be close to those edge compute applications, bringing together the latest in AI and 5G, and what we've learned across our portfolio of assets.
Thank you. We have time for one more question for everyone here. So, the usual kind of final question, I would say. So what emerging trends do you foresee in the next 3 to 5 years that will shape the future of your respective industries? And in the case of eAnd, what is that trend observed across the different sectors that you're in? So perhaps we can start with Sachin.
So, so I did the Vipassana about 5 years ago, and one of the things I learned in it was Buddha said, if I quote this correctly, true wisdom doesn't exist in the intellect. It exists in experience. What I have noticed in the last couple of years is a lot of intellectualization around AI. Just to give you a shapeshift of how I think the world's going to change, I have an example to show you. So I'm going to play a song. When I asked my leadership team, how much do you think this song cost to produce? I had numbers of $100,000, $50,000. So I'm going to play it to you. I'm going to ask the question, then I'll tell you what the amount was.
Build your tomorrow, standing at the edge of possibilities, with an idea that could change reality. No need to know the language of code. He'll guide you down this golden road, like Lego blocks in perfect form. Your dream takes shape, a new world born. At Build.ai, we build tomorrow.
Imagine that was $100. And we're just at the early stage of this wave. You know, we talk about democratizing, we talk about unlocking, they're just the wrong adjectives. The real power over the next 5 years is how do you unleash human productivity? And even if I could find a better word than unleash, I'd probably use that. And I think that's really what we've got all to look forward to do more than we could ever imagine before.
Thank you. That was really great as a clear idea for the audience as well. And how about Sandeep, in your perspective?
So I have a somewhat different spin on this. I was checking into my hotel yesterday, and I was having an issue with my credit card. And I went into the chat support. And the first thing that I tried to do, knowing that this large global credit card company is probably using some chat bot, some chat support agent, was I tried to get to an agent. The first thing that I tried to do. One of the things that I'm really curious about from a trends perspective is understanding how, as a human population, how we retrain the habits that we've developed to try and get to a human quicker, to try and get to that interaction. The reality is that actually, with the technology that exists out there, and I've actually used some of these tools, if I had tried to prompt this chatbot properly, I probably would have gotten to my answer quicker. But I have been trained to try and go get to a human. And one of the big trends that I'm looking forward to getting to an understanding of, and it probably touches on the point that Sachin made around unleashing human productivity, is coming to grasp with actually how best should I be working with a lot of these models. Not as a trick, not as to answer some questions, not as to create a little bit of copy, but what are the things that really I can do, but how do I retrain my own behavior to try and get a better understanding of what's the best way that I should be using these models? What's the best way that I can be using this technology? That, from my perspective, will be something that will really shift our society for the years to come.
There's the importance of education in a way for, let's say, and being adaptable within our behavior as well. Thank you. And Faisal?
Maybe touching on some of Sandeep's points here and sort of unleashing productivity and going back to the equity and inclusion part. There's a lot of changes, as we all know, happening in the U.S. Right now with the new administration coming in. But if we think about some of the what we consider to be the winners over the last couple of years, it feels like a lifetime. But we go back to maybe 2020 or 2021 when ChatGPT really hit it. And then we saw Anthropic and some of these other players come online, mostly in the US, but some in Europe. It feels like they're getting bigger and bigger over time. You know, they've sort of sucked up all of the data out there. Now we're thinking about synthetic data, and Sachin's point about hallucinations potentially and risks around that. But I think an interesting thing to keep in mind going forward is, you know, how do we continue to build an ecosystem through places like, I think, Hub 71 here, and you know what Abu Dhabi is doing in general around incentivizing and enabling innovation even for some of the smaller players, rather than, you know, is it a bit of a winner take all in a certain geography with certain companies. But if someone sort of comes up with an idea and is able to implement and execute and access different markets, what can an ecosystem provide for that continued competition, so that we can continue to innovate? You know, one version of the world is there's a lot of concentration that continues to be in San Francisco, but also I think there's another version of the world where if we continue to deglobalize and when we continue to prioritize sort of equity and inclusion with access to these technologies, and I think there's a lot happening in the ecosystem here. There are interesting parts of Europe that have a lot of uptake as well, and it's yet to be seen. But I think it'll be interesting to see how that geographically disperses across. And just going back to, I think, the horizons of innovation that we continue to think about, you know, when can those be applied systematically and commercially beyond the POC?
Thank you. So thank you very much to the panelists. It was a really interesting session where we touched a broad, you know, topic around AI and human productivity, the idea of being able to adapt, user optimization, but also the fact that we are still in the very early age when it comes down to AI. So thank you very much, and thank you all for joining the session with us.